Changjiakou, China, October 2017. In a rural community 120 miles from Beijing, residents make an extraordinary discovery in a local field. They find a 60-foot-long set of bones belonging to a highly unusual animal.
The remains unearthed in Zhangjiakou had antlers, it had prominent claws, it had a long serpentine body. So this created a huge buzz and a lot of fascination.
A video of the strange bones went viral on the internet, and researchers were baffled as they attempted to identify the bizarre creature. But many local villagers insisted that the bones were the remains of a dragon.
Dragons are a huge part of a lot of Asian culture, particularly Chinese culture. They are a tremendously important symbol for many, many people.
Dragons are perhaps one of the most defining elements of Chinese cultural lore, and they have been for thousands of years. Dragons symbolize knowledge, wisdom, otherworldly power, even. A lot of the early imperial families drew their authority from associating themselves with dragon blood or portraying themselves as descendants of dragons. So dragons are a very present creature in the Chinese cultural imagination.
Mainstream scientists remain skeptical as to whether or not the skeleton that was discovered in 2017 belonged to a real dragon. But the media frenzy sparked by its discovery suggested that many people, not only in China, but throughout the world, believe in the existence of dragons.
We have dragons everywhere in time and in different cultures. And it is fascinating because some of these cultures never met. They never had contact within history. So the pervasiveness of dragon myths in cultures across many folkloric contexts is probably no accident.
Dragons are one of the more fantastic creatures to study in mythology and folklore and legends because they're so widespread. They're a big part of our Western culture. Satan is described as a dragon in some passages in the Bible. They're one of the most powerful animal gods in Aboriginal mythology. We have dragons in Ethiopian iconography. And one of the fascinating things is the representations of what a dragon is supposed to look like. It remains remarkably consistent over time.
What's really remarkable is that if we consider all of these different influences that may have contributed to the dragon legends, they're all typically portrayed as being reptilian in nature, having scales and claws, often wings that are very bat-like or membranous in nature, a long reptilian tail with a strange structure or a spike or a stinger on the end, very sharp teeth, the ability to breathe fire. And so we have to consider the possibility that at least some of these dragon legends could be based on some type of extraordinary and perhaps unknown animal.
Sardinia, 1974. On this island, located off the coast of Italy, a farmer in a region known as Mont'e Prama is tilling his fields when he strikes what appears to be a large rock. But upon closer inspection, he realizes that his plow has revealed something far more amazing. It's the head of a massive ancient statue.
The farmer started digging around it, brushing away the mud, pulled it out, and there was this giant stone head gazing back at him with these obsidian eyes. And so this became quite a sensation at the time. It was one of the most important archaeological discoveries of the decade.
Subsequently, archaeologists entered the area, and through the late 70s, they dug and they found over 5,000 fragments of these giant statues. We have archers, we have warriors, we have boxers. They are, generally speaking, about 8 feet tall and approach a ton in weight. And they are unique in the regard that for their time, there was no other statuary that was in human form and size and that level of detail and sophistication.
The monolithic statues came to be known as the Giants of Mont'e. According to archaeologists, they were carved by the Nuragic people, a mysterious civilization that lived on Sardinia nearly 4,000 years ago.
The Nuragic people were the indigenous population of Sardinia, beginning around 1750 BCE. And they were not the kind of society that would have writing. So we don't know a lot beyond their everyday lifestyle, which would be in many ways similar to what was going on throughout the Mediterranean at the same time.
Incredibly, some researchers claim that the reason why the Nuragic people carved statues that were 8 feet tall is because these monoliths were created in the image of an actual race of giants.
One of the strange things about these statues is that they appear to be buried underneath these kind of slabs of stone in this elongated grave, as though they were almost like ancestors being buried in the ground. Why they did this, we don't know, but there are many legends of giants all over Sardinia, and the stories go on and on and on. So this could be the same giants who are memorialized in these particular statues.
Could the monoliths of Mont'e really be evidence that a civilization of giants once inhabited the island of Sardinia, as some believe? Many researchers think that is possible and claim that there are additional clues in folklore throughout the Mediterranean.
Diodorus, an ancient Greek historian, discussed how there was an ancient bloodline of the Athenian civilization known as the 50 Sons of Hercules that mated with a mortal race of women to create a giant bloodline that built these monolithic statues on the island of Sardinia.
This story really put the idea into different philosophers' heads that this was actually a very advanced culture that kind of led up to the time of the Nuragic people and culminated in the era of the Mont'e giants.
The massive monoliths of Mont'e and stories from folklore aren't the only pieces of evidence to suggest that giants once lived on Sardinia. Because there are also mysterious tombs located throughout the island that may have been where their oversized bodies were buried.
What we see at Mont'e Prama are totally separate structures for where they buried their deceased, and these are called the giants' tombs, tomba dei giganti. They are typically made of one very large stone that have a semi-hemispherical entry area or front that curves inward, with the center part having a small hole down at the bottom, which is where the skeleton would have been interred.
As you see these giants' tombs, what you realize is that it's entirely made of large blocks with a small opening in the base. In tradition, these were the burial places designed for giants, and they would actually build the tomb around it. This is one of the clues that kind of links with the legends that giants did exist in Sardinia. But there is further evidence that actual skeletons have been found in some of these giants' graves. We have accounts from 1901 where there's a report of 4 9-foot skeletons being unearthed in the vicinity in northern Sardinia. And even relatively recently, there are reports of 3 skeletons being dug up in an area called Torralba in southwest Sardinia. However, the problem is that most of the evidence has now disappeared. They've just gone missing, basically. And so you have to question, why is this? Is there a cover-up?
Is it possible that the bones of giants have actually been hidden from the public? It's an intriguing theory, and it deepens the mystery surrounding the strange, towering statues uncovered at Mont'e Prama.
The giants of Mont'e Prama are very unique and enigmatic. And Sardinia's myths and stories about who these people were typically talk about giants, but there's a lot of things we don't know about who these people were. And so these giant statues are the mystery within that mystery.
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. High atop a plateau overlooking the Allegheny River sits St. Anthony's Chapel. Every day, Christians from all over the world pass beneath its tall spires and rounded arches to participate in devotion and prayer. However, it's not the outside of St. Anthony's Chapel that makes it such an inspiring destination, but rather the inside. Because within this church lies something that is quite unusual. A collection of thousands of bones that once belonged to Catholic saints.
When you come here and you walk in and you see these beautiful gold or brass reliquaries and just how vast the collection is, which include anything from a part of an arm bone or a leg bone to the skulls and the full skeletons. It really is just overwhelming. At St. Anthony Chapel, there are over 5,000 relics, and this collection is second only to the Vatican. So here at St. Anthony's, it really is a unique experience to come and see the relics of saints.
The relics of St. Anthony, St. Demetrius, St. Stephana, and St. Theodore, among many others, are kept in St. Anthony's Chapel.
St. Anthony's is quite a place. They have items, they come from the four corners of the world, mostly the Holy Land, and they're all protected there, and we can see these relics. You can see a little of the holy there in a tooth or a piece of skull, which is a relic, a piece of a saint. A relic that you can actually look at and be close to. That's like a little bit of God right there in the chapel.
Millions of Christians consider holy relics to be sacred, and it's well known that the bones of many saints are preserved in cathedrals throughout the world. But how did such a vast collection of relics end up in a chapel in Pittsburgh?
What makes the collection of relics here particularly unique is the way in which they were obtained by Father Mullinger, who built the chapel. He obtained them in the late 1880s because there were people who just thought that the relics had no value and things were being discarded. Father Mullinger had a network of people in Europe who were preserving the relics, and he would go and retrieve them himself. We have pilgrimages come in at least once a week, if not more, and what a gift it is to be able to welcome them and share this treasure that we have here.
Each and every relic is enclosed with a wax seal, both to ensure its authenticity and to protect it from those who might wish to tamper with the holy remains. But why are holy relics so coveted and revered in the first place? Why go to such extraordinary lengths to preserve these ancient bones?
All throughout Europe, in churches, you'll see these bejeweled skeletons adorned with gold, silver, and expensive jewels that really look like they're works of art, but strange works of art. And the whole purpose of this is because there is this idea, especially Christianity, that there is this inherent spiritual power that infuses the remains. And that spirit has to be honored.
The bones of saints and martyrs in Christianity are of exceptional value and extraordinary power according to Christian tradition. It was believed that when a saint was murdered for their beliefs, that their bones became infused with their sanctity, the essence of their grace.
Holy relics, specifically skeletal relics, stem from this tradition that the bones themselves possess power. And this comes from the Bible. You have a story in 2 Kings in the Hebrew Bible, in the Old Testament, of a burial procession, and they were doing a burial. And they saw some invaders coming, and they just threw the body on top of the bones of the prophet Elisha, which were already lying in the ground. And as soon as the dead body touched the bones of Elisha, they came back to life. So obviously the bones of Elisha have some life-giving property.
We also have stories from the very beginning of Christianity about miracles related to the bones of different saints. The bones of Saint Lazarus, for example, who was raised from the dead by Jesus, were highly coveted. And there are legends in Provence that the bones of Lazarus were brought in to people who were sick and dying, and that utilizing the bones in the presence of these people with the right kind of prayers would then heal them of this near fatal illness.
Paris, France. More than 2 million people live and work in this 41 square mile metropolis. And although Paris is one of the world's most instantly recognizable cities, just below the surface of the City of Light lurks a mysterious darkness. A centuries-old labyrinth of tunnels that contains the bones of millions of bodies. The Paris Catacombs.
When you walk in there, you'll see bones stacked. They're everywhere. You'll have thigh bones stacked up in places. You'll have skulls stacked in other places. It's almost like a warehouse of human bones.
We don't know which bone goes with which. Sometimes they're just piled up, but sometimes it's almost a decoration where they put them. In some cases, they're more architecturally or artistically placed.
There are lined along the walls thousands of skeletons, some with bits of clothing hanging off of them. It's a whole network of tunnels, really. There's about a mile of it that's open to visitors, and you can see some of these places.
Over the main entrance to the Paris Catacombs, there is carved a sign which, when translated, reads, "Stop. This is the Empire of the Dead." According to some estimates, the Paris Catacombs hold the bones of more than 6 million people. But why did Parisians decide to stack all these bones together in the first place?
In Paris, you had people being buried in a traditional sense in a graveyard, but those are finite locations. And they started running out of space. So if that is the case, after a certain amount of time, individuals are gonna get dug back up to create space for new burials. Then you have to do something with those bones. So they started to utilize catacombs as a way to relocate those bones.
We stopped buried corpses in 1780, and in 1785, we began to transport bones in this place, which were at that time in the suburb of Paris. We officially opened the catacomb to the public in 1809.
In the Parisian catacombs, very often bones have been rearranged, made into even sculptural sort of forms. In many ways, this conflicts with that Christian idea of keeping the body together.
The one thing most funeral practices have in the world is some kind of respect for one's ancestor, or some kind of feeling that this is one last act of charity that needs to be completed for the soul to move on properly. On the other hand, the Paris Catacombs was not a sacred site. They're going to get rid of the old bones, and they don't want to have this problem again. I would question whether the Paris Catacombs are respectful to the dead or not.